table 13, your ride is here. Table 13, awkward. Now, ladies and gentlemen, a very special treat. We'd like to introduce Disney Imagineering's most foolish mortals. Are you going to do that every time? No. Disney's most foolish mortals are now going to discuss one of your favorite attractions. Ladies and gentlemen, let's have a big hand for Disney Imagineering.
How about a hand for the organist, ladies and gentlemen? These guys are freaking me out.
Everyone here is freaking me out.
How y'all doing tonight? Good? This is so much fun. Thank you so much for inviting us to this. My name is Eric Goodman. We'll start with introductions, and then we have a great presentation that we will
They're going to come up and film us as we're talking, just like with the
They're right here. I know, it's like right here. This is awesome. And we have a great
one good one.
Oh, wait. Kodak picture moment. Smart. Oh, that was good.
Give me an email address.
So let me start. My name is Eric Goodman. I'm a show producer with Walt Disney Imagineering. Kind of a little bit of history about myself. My grandfather actually helped open Disneyland back in 1955, and my mom worked in the park, so I'm a third generation cast member. I've basically never had to pay to get in the park, so it's my big claim to fame. I started with the company in 1989. I was actually in entertainment over at the studios, and joined Imagineering in 1998 as a show producer. You might have seen my work at Innoventions if you've been over there at Epcot. I also worked on Mission Space, and we just finished, Pete will come next, but just last year, Pete and I finished the new queue line for the Haunted Mansion, so that's why we're here to talk about that. We're thrilled. And this is my cohort in crime, Pete Carsillo.
I'm sorry, that's all the time we have. Good night, everybody.
No, my name is Pete Carsillo. I was the show designer and art director for the latest round of enhancements at the Haunted Mansion. And my history isn't nearly as wonderful as yours, but it is pretty wonderful. Anytime you can be associated with Walt Disney Imagineering, it's pretty wonderful. I actually started working with the company back in 1986 on Phantom Manor. Actually, I was on the design team for Phantom Manor, and it's a wonderful attraction if you haven't been
There's a
there.
French person in the audience. I think I just heard an applause. There's a French person just applauding from Phantom Manor. That was...
Shout out for Paris.
Okay, there you go.
And I actually went off and built attractions all around the world for other theme park companies we won't mention. And then about 5 years ago, came back to Walt Disney Imagineering. And since that time, aside from the Haunted Mansion, where we spent the last year, I was the production designer for the Hall of Presidents on our recent refresh. Also the set decorator for the recent Spaceship Earth refresh. So I'm really big on refreshes. And we've got a lot of other projects in the works, which we hope to thrill you with next year. But that's I think pretty much me.
At some point, we will begin talking about the ride. I promise. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, just for those of you who don't notice, Pete is wearing a blue name tag.
Yes, Pete is different from all of us.
Because he's a Walt Disney Legacy Award winner.
Yeah.
It's a real honor, and I hope there's some other Legacy Award winners out there tonight. So I'm proud of all of you.
The pressure is on now for Pete. Who's next?
I am Jason Surrell. I'm a senior show writer for Walt Disney Imagineering. Thank you, one person. I love that. Excellent.
That's your mom.
And I think it was my wife, actually, so that doesn't even really count. I started with Disney in 1989 as at the Jungle Cruise as a skipper, and I've been with Walt Disney Imagineering for about 12 years. I was one of the co-writers on the new Star Tours, if any of you have been on that. I recently wrote the American Idol experience over at the studios, worked on Monsters, Inc., Laugh Floor, and I'm currently working on a bunch of stuff I can't really talk about. But then there's the other Jason.
Hi, I'm the other Jason. I'm a concept designer for Walt Disney Imagineering. I'll be really quick. I've been this week marked my lucky 13th year with WDI, so very excited. I've worked on a lot of things involving princesses, so I've been nicknamed Jason the Boy Princess at work. which I fully embrace, and right now I'm working on New Fantasyland. All right, on with the show.
Excellent. We thought we would begin and introduce you guys to the Haunted Mansion the same way the general public first saw the Haunted Mansion back in 1965. So I've always wanted to say this, and now your host, Walt Disney.
Mark, I want you to meet Julie Reed, Mark Davis. Julie is Miss Disneyland Tencennial, and Mark Davis is the master in charge of our House of Illusions, or what do we call it? Haunted Mansion. Haunted Mansion and Supernatural. Well, to give you a little idea what we're going to have in there.
Yes, well, we're doing a lot of portraits that change right in front of your very eyes. As a matter of fact, one of our paintings here is based on Greek mythology. This is Medusa. She's a very beautiful girl. She offended the goddess Athena, and as a result, Athena turned her into a gorgon. And as you may know, if you looked at a gorgon would turn you into stone.
Well, we sure don't want that to happen. What does tell her about this thing here, really, Mark?
Well, this is our elongating, stretching room. And in this room, we also have some stretching portraits. Perhaps you'd like to look at those over there. These are some
Well, you pull them down, you should see what happens when the room gets longer, you get this full-size portrait. This is my favorite. Oh. Now, come on, let me get a picture here. Another picture right about there. That's it. You seen enough? You want to see some more? We got a lot of stuff.
Oh, let's see some more.
I think we better get out of here. I think we're being watched now.
Good idea.
Lauren, I want you to meet Julie Reed. She is Miss Disneyland Tencennial. This is Roland Crump, who for the project here is sort of acting as the interior decorator of a house of illusion. What do we call it?
Museum of the Weird.
Museum of the Weird. Will you tell her about some of these things, Roland?
These are going to be collected from all over the world, supposedly, and we're going to have man-eating plants, and we're going to have a coffin clock here that we're working on right now. We have a gypsy cart that comes to life with ghosts inside of it. We have a candle man. These are just things that are collected from all over the world. Just the weirdest things we could find.
Yeah, we're also collecting real ghosts to bring you. You believe in ghosts, don't you, Julie?
No.
You don't?
Not really.
Well, let me take you over here and convince you that they do exist. You peek right in this little thing here, and then you tell me what you see. Now, peek in there. What do you see?
Organ.
What's going on?
It's playing.
Yes.
A ghost.
A ghost is playing, sure. What kind of a ghost?
A skeleton ghost.
Yeah, well, they have all kinds of ghosts, you know. Okay. Now you believe, I hope. Huh?
Have to.
I'll come right over here and I'll show you where you're going to meet the ghosts. This is a little scale model now of the Disneyland area. You've seen this many times, but we haven't got the ghosts in there yet. But we're out collecting the ghosts. We're going to bring ghosts from all over the world. And we're making it very attractive to them, hoping, you know, they'll want to come and stay at Disneyland. So we're putting in wall-to-wall cobwebs, and we guarantee them creaky doors and creaky floors. Now, that big hole that
Okay, we can cut it.
talked about earlier, well, this is...
What I love about that clip,
There's so much to love about it.
he cannot get the name right for the life of him. He's like, Julie, we're going to show her the House of Illusion, or what are we calling it? I can picture like Mark and Rolly driving home that day. He kept screwing up the name on national television.
I think it's great. I love that he doesn't, because that would be, I don't know the names of anything, so.
But have you ever seen anybody have so much fun, though? I mean, really, he just was so into it.
And one piece of trivia that you may not know, do you know why he had the camera with him and he's taking pictures of her all over the place? That was the sponsor of the show, so that was how they worked it in instead of having like a traditional commercial.
And it's funny, the Museum of the Weird, that whole piece of it, you know, just seemed to kind of drop off a little bit. You know, they talked about it and then you really never saw it again.
Yeah, they had, Rolly had been kind of working on that idea a little bit independently, and I don't know that he had the full support of the Imagineering team because it was a little out there. And there was one day when they were all doing their presentations to Walt, and Rolly told me this story, and he's like, my stuff was kind of off in the corner, and it was kind of an afterthought, and Walt was walking out, and it happened to catch his eye, and he's like, well, what's all this? So he pitched the Museum of the Weird, and then the next morning, Walt came in, and he goes right up to Rolly, and he goes, I didn't get a wink of sleep last night because all that weird stuff you showed me, Rolly. He didn't say stuff. Kids, go to bed.
Shall we?
Yeah.
Yep.
Here we go, the Haunted Mansion.
Oh, Pete found this.
So Pete,
Yeah, you want to talk about this
Yeah,
piece?
as part of our effort, when we went back and started designing all the new things that we put into the Haunted Mansion, I was the lucky guy who got to go out to our archive and go through all of the original art, all the original drawings, all the original paintings, all of the original notes. And this was a note that I found, and at the top you see the little SM up there. That's Sam McKim, and Sam did some of the original concept drawings of the mansion. And my favorite part of this, and this was one of the driving principles of what we were doing, was at the very bottom, and it says that the attraction was not to frighten, but to amuse and entertain. And of course, we know it all kind of developed a little from there, but I think that's really what separates our Haunted Mansion, the one that we all love so much, from your average haunted attraction.
and we Marty comes down from time to time and talks to us. And a lot of times, Marty will say some of the same stories, but this one time at a meeting, Marty started telling the story about the Haunted Mansion, just to go with your, to amuse and entertain, but try to reread it. See, I can't remember anything either. I'm perfect for the
House
job.
of Illusion.
So Marty said how they went to a meeting with Walt, and it was an hour-and-a-half meeting, and all they did was talk about Haunted Mansion. And when the meeting was starting to wrap up, Marty says to Walt, Walt, what we should do in there is we should try to make it funny. We should inject some humor in there. And Walt looks at Marty and goes, Marty, what do you think we've been talking about for the last 90 minutes? He just wasn't paying attention. So then Herb Ryman developed the Marty joke scale based on, when Marty thinks it's funny, then it's funny. Until then, no one else's opinion matters. So.
And the other interesting thing about that clip, one of the reasons that I like to show it is a lot of people think that Pirates of the Caribbean, it's so widely known as the last attraction that Walt Disney personally supervised, and while that is true, this clip shows you that he was so aware of so many of the show elements that made it into the Haunted Mansion, so over time we've come to feel like this really is the last attraction that Walt really had a lot to do with. So, you may not think of it that way, but there's a lot of Walt Disney in the Haunted Mansion. And this piece is historic. I remember when I was first doing research for the book, I had never seen this piece before. It's entitled Church, Graveyard, and Haunted House. It's by Harper Goff, and the interesting thing is this drawing actually predates the formation of WED. So this is from, I think, early 1952 or even 1951, I can't remember. But what's interesting is it indicates that Walt wanted some kind of haunted experience at Disneyland from the very beginning. And as you can see here, in the earliest days, the way Harper envisioned it, it was kind of a Charles Addams, typical haunted house off to the side of Main Street, which really would have been interesting, but they quickly veered away from that.
Next time, we'll put it there.
It's the only land, I think, that we haven't put a Haunted Mansion in, so we're running out. Did you want to say something?
No.
He's got the clicker, though, so
He's got the clicker.
He'll keep moving on.
This is my virtual whip.
I'm going to use this runway. Is everyone following mine?
We should have dressed for the runway.
Look, you got your hat on backwards and everything. You got your camera. You can do a little Zoolander thing here.
So Jason, let's talk about Ken Anderson.
That's right. Imagineering don't get a lot of press for this kind of thing, but we know how to work with it, right?
All right, the slide, Jason, the slide. What are we looking at here?
I was under the impression we were going to divide the work.
Well, you've taken center stage.
We went over this in the show outline. This was your segment, and we were
For anyone who was
we were
at
going
the
to be the spice,
D23
you were the
event
meat.
in May,
Let's
it's
go.
clear we rehearsed nothing. So this is what you get. You have a question? We're going to do this Phil Donahue style.
Oh dear, we've lost him now.
We have a room of people who actually know who Phil Donahue is, which I find very exciting.
Why don't you go ask
right.
Noah what he thinks?
What?
Why don't you go ask Noah what he thinks while you're out there?
Oh, he's still working. I'll go back.
So we'll start on this one. So this is Ken Anderson.
Talk about Ken Anderson.
Ken Anderson is one of the earliest art directors for Walt Disney Imagineering that came over from feature. And a lot of how the mansion is designed and conceived and thought out is really due to Ken. Ken kind of laid the foundation for that, on which a lot of other Imagineers that you were familiar with then built upon Exitensio and Mark Davis.
And I think he recently got an
Jason,
epitaph
I'm back here
at the
with
Haunted
Noah.
Mansion.
Yes, tell us about it, Pete.
No, we just got him an epitaph at the Haunted Mansion. That's it.
All right, I'm reporting from the field now. Dude, I'm not trying to be criticized, but you were supposed to be done in like 25 minutes. That's crazy. You having a good time?
Hey, Noah, feel free to paint some hair on his head.
I'm not gonna lie, that felt good. Look at that, look at this.
You might be go ahead. All right, so this is
how Brad and Angelina feel, but like every day. All right, keep going, you're doing great.
We wanted the presentation to kill, we didn't want it to die.
Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.
And moving on. So here we are. This is an early aerial view of New Orleans Square and Frontierland for Disneyland, where the Haunted Mansion eventually ended up settled in Disneyland. We're moving forward, and then Jason, explain this painting, please.
This is one of the most famous Herb Ryman paintings. He was really known for his attention to detail, even in a rough concept drawing. And what's famous about this one is in the background there you can see clearly what became the Pirates of the Caribbean show building, although at this point it's still earmarked as a walk-through wax museum. And then you have the nuns in the front. He really took great pains to kind of bring New Orleans to life, and he took it very seriously. So even in his earliest concept renderings, he added that kind of detail. And then this sketch is very famous as. Did you want to say something?
No, he was going to say something.
Okay.
No, this is your section.
Oh, it's my section.
Yes.
Then why am I out?
You remember that?
Come back. Okay. It's very difficult to compete with cheesecake, I have to say. This is actually one of the first drawings that Sam McKim did for the Haunted Mansion as it was built at Disneyland, and it's famous within the company for really showing kind of a rundown, decrepit house, and that was one of the first issues that Walt had with it. He said, you know, we're not going to have anything that run down at Disneyland. We'll take care of the outside. We'll let the ghosts take care of the inside. So then, well, actually, that was a Ken Anderson sketch, and then Sam McKim colored it in, and that created a great deal of controversy.
For a long time, no one knew who owned this piece of artwork, right? Who did it? And the fact that
Sam McKim was credited with it, but what we discovered was that Ken Anderson actually did the sketch. Hello, dear. Okay. And then and Sam McKim actually colored it in. But the funny thing about this story, go ahead. Does anybody see any similarities? That is a house in Baltimore, and this picture wasn't discovered until, unfortunately, after my book was published, so I look like a complete idiot. But
that's not the only reason. Keep going.
He's really very sweet when you get to know him, but it just takes 8 years. No, the interesting thing though is that when I was interviewing Marty Sklar, I was always under the impression that the house was based on Evergreen House, which is another house in Baltimore, and that actually was an influence on the Haunted Mansion. But I sit down with Marty and he kind of leans in very conspiratorially and he goes, you know, Ken just copied that house. And I said, well, there's some similarities, but I don't think he copied it. And Marty's looking at me like I'm crazy. Then that picture comes out and we're all like, ooh.
So these are color boards, elevations, Haunted Mansions. So basically a color board in WDI, we'll get a little bit of design talk here, is once the architects draft up the front elevation of the building, it then goes on to our paint and color department. They take that exact blueprint and then paint in the colors and all the color specs right on top of the blueprint drawing. This is another interesting early drawing. This was from when it was a walkthrough exhibit, correct?
Yeah, that's another Ken Anderson piece. The reason we like to show this one is we actually returned to this drawing as recently as 2007 when we did the enhancement here at Walt Disney World. How many of you are familiar with the endless staircase with the footsteps going? Just to show you how often we return to our own heritage, this actually was very influential. We went back to a lot of the early Ken Anderson pieces in particular, and that's where one of the places that the invisible footprint gag came from.
And the other thing that's really interesting about this drawing too is that the fun thing about the mansion is it's very multi-level. You come in, you go upstairs, you go down, and this is the first drawing where you actually kind of see a view from a balcony looking down, which sort of was a precursor to the ballroom scene in the ride. Because you look at this and it's really exciting. You'd much rather be up on the balcony than on the ground floor Is from, at least from a storytelling perspective.
And sometimes Imagineering almost becomes like an archaeological exercise, because that's a very old sketch, dating back to the late 1950s, but it so clearly influences one of the beloved scenes that everybody remembers, even though that development process didn't happen until 8 years later or so. And then we love this because it is just so 1950s, and this is another Ken Anderson piece. Originally, the walkthrough experience was designed to have the guests just walk through a series of rooms where these series of special effects would unfold, almost like they compared it to an elaborate department store window, like you might see at Macy's, with just minimal animation and tricks of the light and things like that to pull off some of the gags.
And this is fun because it really looks completely different than any of the other kind of pieces of art. This is almost like Twilight Zone Tower of Terror here. It's really kind of...
And Ken Anderson, I think, is one of the unsung heroes of the Haunted Mansion. I mean, people, when the book first came out, they asked, well, what was the biggest surprise for you? And I think, I had always thought, okay, Haunted Mansion is Mark Davis, Ex Atencio, and Claude Coates, but really, you see all of the work that Ken Anderson, Colin Campbell, Sam McKim, all of these other artists really brought to it.
And also this feeling of you're kind of sneaking in, you're looking into it, you're kind of hiding and watching it all happen in front of you. It's a very scary kind of feeling, very voyeuristic, I think, almost. Anyway, I'll stop. Go ahead. Next slide.
I've just been going through them.
You're doing great.
Thanks. Early portraits. These are just more gag paintings. This is Ken Anderson too.
Yeah, he generated like 4 different storylines, many of which revolved around the sea captain and the ill-fated bride. What's ironic is some of those earliest stories were actually a lot more involved and complex than the one we ended up with, which is the retirement home for 999 happy haunts. This piece, does anybody recognize this guy here?
This is the one I refer to as the overzealous Dr. Frankenstein, because he's actually stitched forearms onto Frankenstein.
He really got into his work. No, one of the concepts involved the wedding of a vampire with the boogeyman.
There he is. There's Frankenstein. How many arms right here?
And he's here with us tonight.
Right here. Frankenstein.
Sir, please stand and be embarrassed.
Let's count those arms.
Thank you.
He has one, and that's it.
So anyway, they generated sketches like that and then realized what a copyright infringement would involve and then got away from that story.
So here's Mansion under construction.
And this is California. We should probably mention this is Disneyland.
Yeah, these concepts are all generated for Disneyland, and the house was actually built, as a lot of you know, in 1963, and then it sat there for 6 years behind a construction fence. And the funny thing is, it's like we tell that story so many times, but we don't stop to think about what it actually means. And Jason, you are working on the new Fantasyland right now, am I right?
Yes, that's correct.
Can you imagine what would happen if you basically just stopped what you're doing tomorrow and left it for 6 years?
I don't think.
People would probably not care for it.
People aren't. The funny thing about that too is that one of my things that I worked on the Haunted Mansion now, I'm very proud of, is a construction fence. So we actually went back and referenced this graphic. So I
worked on that one too.
You did work on
I
that
did
one.
the props. I did the urns on the top.
You did the urns.
His parents are unbelievably proud.
They're so proud of him. So let's move on to
even after that remark.
Walt Disney World. Here we are.
Hey, now we're talking about it.
There it is.
There it is.
Hey, let's take a straw poll really quickly. How many of you have been to multiple Haunted Mansions? How many prefer the Disneyland original? Walt Disney World?
It's a local crowd.
Tokyo Disneyland?
I like the Tokyo one because it's very fun. I mean, because it's all in Japanese. And the guy's like, ooh, Mahoto Makoto Sananara. Whoa.
Ladies, he's bilingual.
Wait, has anyone here been on the Tokyo Disneyland Mansion? Seriously, isn't that what it sounds like? Yeah, it's cool.
Like the ghost host is
What?
a very low.
No, I'm done with that one. I can do Mickey in Japanese too, but that one's not. Okay, so moving on. Okay, anyways, there we go.
Phantom Manor. Walt Disney World, the clear winner by landslide.
It's a local crowd. Here we go. Keep going. There it is. Opening day. Spooky
Opening night.
day.
See what I did there? I just flipped it. I flipped it on you. You didn't know what I was going to say, and I flipped it.
I know. I walked over your punchline.
All right, keep going.
Tokyo Disneyland's poster. So the cool thing about Tokyo Disneyland's Haunted Mansion, Pete.
I didn't know there was what's the cool thing about it?
Oh, that it's in.
This is kind of like an awkward firing line. That's the way we rehearsed it.
It is in Fantasyland. And this photo, if you were standing in Tokyo Disneyland right now, behind your back would be Dumbo. Literally 6 feet behind you would be Dumbo. And
That's the way I feel right now. That's right.
And now, if you were there today, Dumbo would be behind you, and then right here above this lantern would be Splash Mountain poking out. It's the craziest juxtaposition, but it's pretty cool.
But the reasoning for that is in Japanese culture, ghost stories are lumped in the same category as fables and fairy tales. So when they were planning Tokyo Disneyland, that was just the most logical place to put it because there wasn't going to be a New Orleans Square, there wasn't going to be a Liberty Square.
Yes.
Phantom Manor?
I've never been.
Really?
No.
You should go sometime.
I never get out of Orlando. I'm a producer. I send my creative people out to go visit the world while I wait here.
The fun thing about Phantom Manor is that the story about Walt saying that we'll take care of the outside and let the ghosts take care of the inside. In Paris, we switched that up. Disneyland Paris is a multilingual park. We have guests coming that speak multiple languages. And so if you don't know, if you're from Greece and you don't know what Phantom Manor means, you don't want to go in this pleasant looking building and have the bejesus scared out of you. So in this case, this is a lesson of knowing your audience and communicate visually. So we purposely made the mansion look run down, look spooky, and look scary as to not startle any Portuguese, Swiss, or whomever it might be that is not a non-English or French speaker.
Are we allowed to say bejesus?
Is that bad?
I don't know. I thought that was safe. Is it okay?
How about this?
Just want to make sure.
Can I tell you one little story I don't think I've ever told before about Phantom Manor?
Anything to get us off the bejesus thing.
I started out in the effects business in Hollywood way back when, and I had a corpse sitting in my studio, and I'd already started working with Disney. And I took that corpse and I brought it into WDI.
To be clear, it was a fake corpse.
No, not a real one. Okay. Sorry, it was made for a movie.
It's like we had Dexter on stage.
One of the ones. I really should have been more careful with that. Sorry, but we had this rubber corpse that was in the studio.
That's what he says now.
I brought it in. It did look very real. And we stuck it under an air conditioning vent. We let the air blow on it, and the hair whipped all around. And they thought, boy, that's kind of cool. And that's how the catacomb scene, where you tip backwards and go underground, that's how that went from being all bleached white skeletons to being really more realistic, scary corpses. It's from our corpses that we had in the closet.
You know, the other thing too is we got in trouble at Disneyland because one of the reasons that the house here is a little bit more sinister looking is because we actually got a ton of guest letters after the Haunted Mansion opened with parents saying, I took my child into this beautiful southern plantation house and he had the bejesus scared out of him. See what I did there? That's a callback. Learned that from Seinfeld. Anyway, so when we started planning the Florida mansion, one of the original concepts, which I think we have coming up, is Herb Ryman did a really beautiful concept rendering of this Hudson River Valley house. It was just gorgeous, and everyone's like, "Whoa, we're going down the same road again." So they decided to turn it into more of this Dutch Gothic manner that you see today, and it was Claude Coates who actually took that design. And if you notice, when you go while you're here, the wings of the house are actually scaled up, so we use a little bit of forced perspective with it. And Claude's intention was to make the house actually seem like a hulking monster that was looming over you, kind of like Mr. Grandt here.
You're 5 slides ahead. It's Kurt Russell time.
Oh, it's Kurt Russell time.
Kurt Russell.
How many of you would like to see Mr. Goldie Hawn? Wow. It's like we're on the set of Cougar Town all of a sudden. Anyway, we always get asked what's it like to work for Walt Disney Imagineering. Can we get a tour of Walt Disney Imagineering? So we thought we would let Kurt Russell give you a tour of Walt Disney Imagineering, but in 1969. So let's roll it.
When word got out of Walt Disney's plans for a haunted mansion, the Ghost Relations Department at WED Enterprises was deluged with inquiries from assorted ghosts and haunts who were dying to get a look at it. An expert staff of master illusioneers worked for more than 10 years planning everything down to the minutest detail. This is the endless hallway of misty passage beckoning you to enter, but offering no end. Of course, a model had to be made for the ghost's approval. Come along and follow us. Who knows? Someday you may want to live here yourself. No haunted mansion would be complete without a seance room. This one was designed as a cozy gathering place where the spirits could practice chain rattling, screeching, and the ever-popular horn blowing. The Imagineers at Wed Enterprises, many of whom were formerly animators at the Disney studio, worked overtime to make these tiny real figures arrive at the haunted mansion as ghosts. Seems to work well enough, doesn't it? Suitable sleeping quarters had to be prepared. You might call this a model apartment. As the ghosts began to arrive, individual problems began to pop up. A skeleton crew of technicians was kept busy full-time, attending to the peculiar needs of the future inhabitants. No stone was left unturned. Some of the ethereal inhabitants were much too shy to be seen by mortals, and mechanical substitutes had to be devised to make them visible. What you are seeing is a man operating a machine that activates the mechanical features of this head. Or is it the other way around? Well, whatever it is, it seems to work. At least, I think that's what this fellow is trying to tell us. With the aid of these banks of electronic equipment, even the household pets were animated, including these two friendly creatures. A system was developed by the people at Disney to control the movements of the ghostly inhabitants of the haunted mansion through the use of scalloped edge discs. Roller cams followed the depressions and shoulders, producing realistic movements that helped to bring our spooky tenants to life, if you'll excuse the pun. This system was called audio animatronics, which combined three-dimensional animation and sound through the use of electronics. By stacking these discs, a number of functions could be controlled at the same time. As a matter of fact, every movement and sound of all the tenants of the haunted mansion is directed in this manner. Is it any wonder that it took more than 10 years to complete the job? An interesting phenomenon that we seem to have no control over is this old gentleman who just can't seem to keep his eyes off of you no matter where you go. Probably the single most difficult problem faced by the Illusionaires at WED was that posed by some of the more bashful boarders who refused to show their faces. Some of the busts even appeared to be unfinished. The head was there, but the face was missing. But you know how it is. At Disney's, there's always a couple of faces left lying around on the floor.
As the moon climbs high over the dead oak tree, creepy creeps with eerie eyes, grim grinning ghosts come out to socialize.
Finally, everyone was brought together. They all seemed to be in good order and capable of taking care of themselves. Although some needed a hand. Or the latest in haunting hairdos. Everything was finally ready. Musicians were recruited. A cast party was held. And some last-minute repairs were made. It was so exciting that this poor fellow lost his head. The Haunted Mansion was an idea of Walt Disney's. You see, he began to worry where ghosts were going to live after all the old houses were torn down to make room for freeways. He decided that if someone didn't give him a house to live in, they'd just disappear. So Mr. Disney built a haunted mansion.
Oh boy, but I'm sure glad it's not Halloween tonight.
Well, how come, Donnie?
Well, there'd be so many ghosts here, there wouldn't be any room for us.
Come on, boy. Come on, the line's moving. Yeah.
Okay, we can cut it. Donnie Osmond, ladies and gentlemen.
You know, Pete brought his album. How many people got this album as a kid? Yep, just a few. I got this album. I grew up on this album. I thought it was really interesting the way that the Haunted Mansion was like pre-sold to us. When I walked into the Haunted Mansion for the first time, I knew exactly what was going to happen. I knew all the characters, and I got it from this album right here. So thanks for bringing that.
Yeah, I pored over this as a child. This is, you know, Colin Campbell, everybody, right? I mean, this is just amazing stuff, and it's amazing how they set everybody up, right?
It influenced a lot of Imagineers, actually. You hear a lot of people bring up that story album, because I was the same way. I listened to it at home a gazillion times before I set foot in the mansion, because I wasn't old enough yet. But the other reason we like showing
That was
that...
back when it was over 18 only.
That's true. Well, the other reason we love showing that clip is it demonstrates that many of the effects that were originally pioneered for the Haunted Mansion are still in use today and still just as effective today. You know, in a digital age where you can pretty much do anything with a computer, some of this turn-of-the-century stage magic that we use in the Haunted Mansion is still the most effective way to tell a story and sell a story.
So now what we're going to do is we're going to go through the 3 things that we think make the Haunted Mansion really sort of the penultimate Disney attraction. And those things are atmosphere.
Get it? And that was your gag.
That was mine, I'm sorry. That's why I'm not the senior show writer.
I would have...
But I am working towards an internship. So
it is true.
And then the next section is deadly details, and then last, dying of laughter. So let's proceed, please.
This was the Herb Ryman rendering of the Haunted Mansion here for Walt Disney World in Florida. As you can see, it looks much different. It looks like it's straight out of a Washington Irving story, much more benign than what we ended up with. And then this image was actually found in the same catalog of Victorian design and ornamentation that image of the New Orleans house was in. So they definitely went to that well a couple times. And you can totally see how it influenced the Dutch Gothic design of our house here. This is an image of an original concept that Mark Davis came up with for the lobby. Now, here in Florida, when you go in, we have the kind of, in addition to the ghost host talking, we have kind of the picture of Dorian Gray where the master seems to age right in front of you. Originally, for Disneyland, they came up with a concept where you were going to encounter one of the busts immediately, and it was actually going to begin talking to you. And they backed away from that because they were afraid that they would immediately run into some operational issues if people lingered too long in the lobby, which is why they ultimately went to just straight narration, and here in Florida, the transforming portrait. And here are some concepts, of course, for the stretch room. The interesting thing here is you learn that this is, in fact, the ghost host. You did not know that.
You know what? And Eric didn't know it either.
I did not. How many people knew that the guy who was hanging there was actually the ghost host?
There's always my way.
I know, and my way is suicide. I mean, that's what he was saying. I never got that.
You thought he was thinking of Sammy Davis Jr. So
I thought he was thinking just death, but it was suicide. It turns the whole Haunted Mansion to a completely different
It's
story.
in the atmosphere section.
And Jason, did you climb up and get that picture? Is it?
No, that we found in the archives, but the interesting thing is you never see that. You know, because when we were going through photos for the book and ran across this, it's like, wow, people never get to see that angle unless they're doing something they really should not be doing.
Right.
Here's a concept and a photo of the watchful bust gag, and the interesting thing about that is they discovered that by accident. It was Rolly Crump and Yale Gracie who were pioneering some special effects for the Haunted Mansion, and they happened to have a life cast of Lincoln that was at the studio for some reason, and it was positioned in such a way in their workshop that when it was backlit and they walked past it, it appeared to follow them wherever they went because of that inverse 3D impression, and literally by accident that's where they came up with the bust gag. And then, of course, we have the classic transforming portraits. All of these are Mark Davis concepts. One of the gags that was recently upgraded, as you'll see here in Florida. This is interesting. This is a Claude Coates sketch for the attic. You don't normally see a lot of his stuff. of that style, but that demonstrates, you know, he was really in the scary camp, because over time, especially when we lost Walt in 1966, a little war broke out between the people that felt it should be funny and the people that felt it should be scary, and Claude kind of led the camp that felt that it should be scary, and you can see that in a lot of his work. And then, of course, there are the singing bus, which employs what we call the Leota effect, which was another accident. Again, Rowley and Yale were kind of just messing around in that workshop of theirs, and they happened to have a bust just sitting there for something that they were going to use for something else. It was a bust of Beethoven. So they took some film footage of Hans Conried, who had, they shot his face for the Magic Mirror for one of the Sunday night TV shows. So they knew they had some facial photography on hand, so they just rigged up a projector, threw it on that bust of Beethoven, and boom, that's where the Leota effect comes from.
And then the other thing about the bus that's so great about, at least as far as atmosphere is concerned, is what's one of the most signature things about the Haunted Mansion is the music. It's the singing and the song, and that really, I think, you know, makes it what it is. You can't imagine the attraction without that song, without the singing bus, without any of that. It just wouldn't work. Someone's blowing up. What is that? Are you okay? No, that's all right. I just want to make sure no one's exploding. Are you doing it? Okay?
Destruct sequence activated.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. We live!
Yeah, okay, you have to pick on the tween.
I'm sorry, I didn't know
She's
at the
develop
time.
an eating disorder
I don't
now
have
because of you.
I don't know.
She doesn't have my snappy remarks. We're sorry. We'll give you a...
We're losing cohesion over
It's his
here.
fault.
People wonder why it takes us so long to design things.
You guys are doing great.
Thank you.
Oh, that's
Cat Box Ghost. That's Yale Gracie.
Yeah, look at that. Boy, I wish we could bring that back.
Where's his pipe?
I don't know.
He's a pipe.
So, what am I talking about, Yale Gracie? What a wonderful character it is.
Yeah, and the fact that, you know, more people talk about a character that doesn't even appear in the Haunted Mansion, you know, than some of the ones that do. And there's a campaign even today to get him added to the mansion.
I've talked to those people.
Would you guys like that?
So this atmospheric
Is that your mom?
apparition
No,
is
but
near
I
and
do
dear to you,
believe
so please explain.
my mom, who is here tonight, is single-handedly responsible for the Living Night being removed from the Disneyland attraction, because what happened was in the mid-1980s, the Imagineering team felt that the Haunted Mansion was becoming something of a predictable experience. It was a wonderful experience, but it was the exact same every time you rode. So Tony Baxter and a bunch of the Imagineers thought, why don't we introduce an unpredictable element? So they came up with a number of living characters. There was a knight, and there was also kind of a Phantom of the Opera type figure. And they thought they would place them in the show, and they would show up at different times in different places and come to life. And what wound up happening was this knight was in the corridor of doors, and my family had just moved out to California, so we were unfamiliar with all this. We'd grown up with Walt Disney World and the Haunted Mansion here. So I'm riding for the very first time with my mom. We go into the corridor of doors, the doom buggy swings around, and all of a sudden there's this suit of armor reaching into the car. My mom hauls off and belts this guy right in the face, and you hear like this 18-year-old kid going, "Ah!" And he was gone like a couple of weeks later. So I apologize, America. You're just going to click through. Exitensio, brought over by Walt Disney.
Oh yeah.
Round of applause.
The song. Let's start with the song.
Yeah, Walt basically showed up at his desk one day and said, X, you're going to go to Imagineering and you're going to be a writer. X had never written a word in his life. He was an animator, had no idea what Walt was talking about. And, you know, the way he tells the story, he's like, well, in those days you just did what Walt wanted, so I guess I was going to be an Imagineer.
The version I heard, X said that Walt asked him to come to WED, and he went to WED, and then after like 2 weeks he went to Walt, what am I doing here? Because he hadn't done anything, and Walt goes, well, you're going to be a writer. And he's like, okay.
And his first assignment actually was Pirates of the Caribbean, and he said, well, you know, or do the script for Pirates. And he's like, he'd never seen a pirate movie in his life, had no idea what to do. So he just said, so I went to the library.
A quick sidebar on that, when Walt pulled people over from the studios to go to WED, Rowley said that all the people who were still in animation referred to WED as Cannibal Island, because when you went there, you never came back. So.
That's true. You know, Blaine Gibson tells that story too, where he would just become an assistant animator to Frank Thomas. And he worked his way up from doing pixie dust in Peter Pan all the way up to character animation. And then he got the call to go over to WED, and he said, I don't want to go. And they said, well, yeah, too bad.
Yeah. This is Paul Frees, the infamous voice of the Ghost host. He was also the voice of Ludwig von Drake and most of the Pirates of the Caribbean, legendary voice actor. Although I cannot picture it, he was also the first voice of the Pillsbury Doughboy. So, discuss.
And we should say that the new queue line, if you've gone through it, we put a little stone for Paul Frees. We want to honor him.
Yeah, a lot of you guys.
And that was the only epitaph that I wrote that they kept. I wrote lots, and I'm not a writer, and I've been reminded of that many times, but I did write that one.
You did write that one. And he's also the only one you told me that was not an Imagineer. All the gravestones we have there are Disney legends and Imagineers, and he's
so special. It seems like he did every show I ever watched growing up as a kid, aside from the Disney products. I mean, he was the Christmas specials, he was the Burgermeister, Meisterburger, all these wonderful characters. And of course, the record album was so firmly in our minds. So we really wanted to be sure he was honored.
So our next section is Deadly Details. The interesting thing about the mansion is if you look, everyone talks about how Imagineering, there's attention to detail. The interesting thing about the mansion is that, at least that we can discern, it's the first example of an attraction that is heavily detailed with detail that's actually been customized for the story. So in the past, you'd see things like Main Street or Fantasyland, where basically it was sort of, I don't want to say it was a replication, but it was directly inspired by the historical equivalents. In Mansion, you see something different. In Mansion,
or the film-based equivalent.
Or the film-based, right. So in Mansion, you see something different. You see details created specifically for the Mansion. And we talked about Museum of the Weird earlier, and Pete leveraged some of this with the Q thing, is you look at a guy like Rolly Crump, and Rolly Crump was a really amazing designer, and I mean this in the best sense. Some people would take offense to this, but he was almost like a decorator. Like he would get in there and he was a stylist like Mary Blair. And so you'd see a lot of these things for Museum of the Weird, like chairs with faces and clocks with faces and all of these things. And so while Museum of the Weird doesn't exist, it really does in the Mansion right now, because you look at the grates on the fireplaces and you look at all of these things with all the hidden monster faces. That's Museum of the Weird, and that's Rolly Crump.
And the torches were his design too.
Yeah, all of that stuff.
He was really inspired by Cocteau's Beauty and the Beast, which had a lot of body parts basically built into the architecture. That was a huge influence on him.
Yeah, these are the stanchions that are bats that are all handmade. And we actually use some of those.
Here's something that
there it is.
Nobody's seen yet. Nobody sees this up close in the Mansion, but how many have seen the new interactive hitchhiking ghosts? Have you all seen it? Okay, so one of the neat things about that is that it's something we can keep growing and changing with. I mean, it's not a fixed show. We can keep improving it and making it better. But has anybody seen where Ezra tips his hat? Has anybody gotten that particular experience? Because if you notice, little bats fly out of his hat. And the little bat is even a little baby bat, by the way. But all the bats are based on the bat stanchion. So if you look closely, you'll see that's the bat right there.
It took us weeks to get to that bat too. There's a lot of revisions.
Has to be right.
Yeah, it's got to be right. You're absolutely right.
And then there's, of course, the famous wallpaper, which is often credited to Mark Davis. And while he did contribute to it, the wallpaper is largely a Rolly Crump creation. And he pointed that out to me when he saw it in print. He said, "You did your homework."
Who did that? That looks great.
That is the most amazing air conditioning grate I have ever seen.
You gave away the punchline.
Oh.
Who took it? I'm joking.
You shouldn't have made fun of me when I was out there.
I know.
It's very hurtful. I'm going to start a support group with
we
that girl.
included this because I worked in the Haunted Mansion, but this is totally silly. So I always tell people, if you're comfortable in the room with no windows and no doors, it's because of this beautiful air conditioner vent that I designed. So it keeps all of us foolish mortals.
If that was not a prompt for applause, I don't know what is.
It's one of those things where people are like, "Oh, we need you to help with the mansion," and I mean that when you hear those words, it's like, "Oh my God, I'm going to get to contribute to the man." It's like I trim the bushes at the mansion, and like, well, what do I need to do? Oh, we need you to design an air conditioning vent.
Yeah, April 9th, 2009. That's when they called me.
Yeah,
I actually remember that because it was such a
killer. It's awesome. Ballroom scene, more fun, more dirt, more dust,
more detail,
more
that
detail.
You can shake a stick at.
This is your part, Pete.
Yeah, this is one of the. You've seen we kind of expanded the cemetery recently. We had this wonderful opportunity to not only make a part that you could walk through, but also make the hillside kind of go up further. In my dream, because Imagineers, we always dream very big. In my dream, the cemetery actually surrounds the house, goes down into the river, and the river flooded up over it. We designed tons of stuff that we didn't get to use because Eric was the producer. Did I mention that? No, Eric did a great job supporting me. It's just that, there's always a limit. We always hit the wall. But here you see some of the busts these are show scale models from the original Haunted Mansion design. You saw the sketches earlier. This inspired part of our new cemetery. And there, if anybody's seen the characters out there, this is one of those really weird points because you get to come up with something that feels classic but also is a little bit new. That's one of my big goals with the entire project, was to be very much in the old school world, but to kick the door open a little for a new story. Because there's a lot more grim grinning ghosts that we haven't explored yet.
And what's interesting, and Pete won't say this, so we'll say it for him, but
Presentation because he won't say it.
Pete actually apprenticed with Blaine Gibson, spent a lot of time with him in his studio, actually worked with him on the Roy statue that we have here in Florida. And when you go into the cemetery in the new queue at the Haunted Mansion, Pete made a conscious attempt. Not only did he return to a lot of Blaine's original material for inspiration, but he took those designs to Blaine, who's retired and living in Arizona, to get his blessing. So even though you're looking at something that's brand new to the Haunted Mansion, you're actually looking at something that is very much steeped in tradition and signed off on by one of the legends. So it's really, really, really cool to.
We locked Pete in a closet at Imagineering, and he sculpted every single one of these in like 6 weeks. I mean, you just flew through all these
behind
sculpts.
schedule the whole time.
Yeah, every day I walk in, I'm like, you haven't finished this one yet. You gotta keep going. And I'd walk out going, I can't believe he can do that with his hands. I mean, it's just amazing, the work.
You obviously never had a back rub from Pete. No.
Well, it's a great.
The funny thing is, I didn't go there because I thought it was in poor taste.
I figured I'd say it before you did.
Okay.
Well, one of the things too I will mention about these is we're trying to stay in Mark Davis and Blaine Gibson's head the whole time is a pretty wonderful experience, and trying to get into their style of character, because when you walk into the cemetery, it shouldn't feel like Haunted Cemetery number 105, right? This is Disney's Haunted Mansion, and so it has to be Disney's cemetery. It can't feel like the one down at the haunted house that the JC's put up, as lovely as those are. It has to feel like ours, right? The one that we love. And so that's why we were trying to create characters that really felt like they belonged in the stretch room, that felt like they belonged in the gallery, and they were very consistent with that. But this is one little detail, and this is why you come to these kind of events, folks. This is really tiny little things. There's a story, right? Part of it is kind of they're kind of grim folks. Who killed who sort of story. Has anybody done the game? Yeah. Okay, because I'm gonna have to give away the ending here a little bit.
Does anyone know the ending?
Oh, see, there's lots of little
Spoiler
things.
alert.
Okay, so cousin Maud, right, the family beauty, she never awoke the night her dreams went up in smoke. And of course, she's not that beautiful, but the idea here, of course, is everyone was trying to get the family fortune, and so she was the last one, and she died in her sleep in a fire. But if you look really close at the back of the bust, right up at the top in their hair, you'll see 3 little matchsticks there. And the idea there is that she burned down her bedroom and she got away with the family fortune. So it's kind of a happy ending at the Haunted Mansion. Now these two, we've had a lot of press on these two. People wondered about having kids at the Haunted Mansion because there's, admittedly, deceased children. It's kind of
I
dark.
learned that the hard way on the 2007 enhancement, because what initially, I was in this one meeting, I was so excited because I thought I'd cracked the code, because one of the hallmarks of the Haunted Mansion is every time you hear Grim Grinning Ghosts, it's a different arrangement. It's kind of an organ funeral dirge in the beginning, it's a graveyard jamboree at the end, it's a Rachmaninoff version in the music room, it's a waltz in the ballroom scene. So I came in, I was so excited, and I'm like, wouldn't it be great if on the Endless Staircase we have like a nursery rhyme version of it? And there's like a little ball bouncing and jacks being played, and kids kind of doing a sing-songy version, and there was dead silence, and everyone's just looking at me, and I'm like, ooh, maybe dead kids, isn't cool in a Disney park. But I wasn't at that meeting. But I was thinking like The Shining, because kids are scary.
Well, they are.
No offense.
And so You know, one of the things that we're trying to do though is when guests come to the show, they can identify with it. You know, they can identify, see themselves in the characters in the show. And we've had so many videos because we put up a little camera and we kind of secretly watch what's going on. And we put up a little camera and there's so many kids that come running into the queue and they stand right next to the head and they make that little bratty face and mom and dad take a picture. And it's really a great moment for them. And so they see themselves in the story now. But what's really interesting about these characters is that this head was the original model for those two characters, and this was sculpted by Blaine Gibson, originally for the Haunted Mansion, and was not used. And so we went back to the archive, got this head, and then I kind of modified it into the twins that we see today.
I just think that's the coolest thing, because it's like you're really returning to some of the original masters' work and kind of carrying that on today.
And you can see that in this sketch of the Sea Mariner.
Yeah, another Ken Anderson story, right? The one that was originally the whole story for the Haunted Mansion. And so we found that, and I said, well, we've got to have the sea captain be more prominent in the story. So I came up with this based on some crypts that we saw in Paris, and this is the final sea captain's crypt. And originally I had it as a really dark story. You know, the guy was like tied to the anchor and pulled under the ocean, and this was his, his crypt. And then Michael Sprout, who's another one of our writers at Walt Disney Imagineering, who's just, he's just a gag every 3 seconds. He's an amazing guy. He came up with this epitaph about drowning while taking a bath, and was like, all right, I can't fight that. It's brilliant. So, and it's really been a lot of fun. And you want to tell about the water?
What about the water?
You know about the kids?
Oh, no, I don't know what you're... Oh, well, when we play tested this, so we do a lot of play testing out in the audience.
We rehearsed this.
We got this all down. We do a lot of play testing.
We just rehearsed it with other people.
That's interactive. So I actually put a big treasure chest out at the studios to see what guests would do when they were walking by in a queue line, to see what they would do when they were walking by water. And the kids were all drinking the water. And people were filling up thermoses, and the parents were like going, "What are you doing? Cut it out!" And so it's completely
that guy in there.
Water. There's no, I mean, it's great water, but we wanted to put a smell. We wanted to put like a pickle smell because it was pickled in brine. And I was like, that's not going to work because then you're going to think that it's bad water.
Yeah,
but these are some great pictures of the queue. If you haven't been over there, please head over. I know we got to wrap it up. We just got a few more seconds here, so we're flying through these.
Why don't we end on this one?
Oh yeah,
this one is good. So, how do we want to do this?
You go right ahead.
I'll go right ahead. Okay, so the funny thing is about the Haunted Mansion, with all of this detail, all this atmosphere, all of these things that we've done to create one of the most immersive environments we've ever done, it obviously works because it's been around now 40 years in this park, longer at Disneyland. And look at the ride vehicle, the Doom Buggy, which, if you didn't know any better, could probably pass for a Tupperware container with people inside. And the funny thing is that you sit in the vehicle and it just melts away, and it's great, and it's become an iconic part of the attraction, where if you showed this to most people, they would know exactly what it is, even though it is so completely nondescript. And it's just amazing, to me at least. I think it's amazing. I mean, it has one of the coolest names of any Disney ride vehicle. So,
It's a fun ride.
it is. So thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's still going.
He's still going. He's still going. And I guess we'll get out of here. So, all right.
Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody. Oh, there it is.
Thank you. Let's hear it for these lovely gentlemen.